Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Gratis group chat. This is going to be episode 3 of season 2. Today's guest may be a familiar face to those of you who follow me. She interviewed me while I was in Amsterdam in May. She's a wonderful conversationalist with a background in radio, and she is a podcast host of 4 shows where she invites guests on to discuss various topics. Very Vogue, where she breaks down what is trending in pop culture and fashion. One More Light, where she discusses mental health. All Octaves, where she features musicians and music fans. And Chilling Chatter, where she discusses paranormal activity and horror films. Please welcome Val Kleinhans.
Hello! I'm not busy at all. Just with you reading that list, I'm like, Jesus, I do all that? I guess I do.
You do. I'm like so amazed. Part of my questioning, and we can just jump in, is how did you get into, I know you did radio.
Yes, I did.
And then now you do podcasting. Mm-hmm. How did you get into it? How do you balance all of it? All of that.
Well, so the radio thing started, I think, when I was a kid. I was always told I had a nice voice.
You do.
And then, well, thank you.
Yes.
I was told that that might be something to think about because it was a good way to use that natural skill and combine my love of music, which I've been really, really heavy into music. A lot of like hard rock, heavy metal, hip hop. That's kind of my wheelhouse.
Okay.
Since I was, 10 is when I started taking all of that like really seriously and being a big fan. And that was like your default personality trait was you were like the music person.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to be 17, 18, and you start deciding, what do I want to do with, like, what do I want to do for a living? I thought radio was the answer because it kind of combined the two. Then I got into the industry, and I had a great time in college just practicing, learning how to produce programs, learning how to deal with mic settings and use it, and practice with the live show on the college radio station where I went to school, which was Point Park University in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And it was a great time. And I had an internship at our local Pittsburgh radio stations, and I learned a lot. And that internship did turn into a job using, they call it a board operator, but essentially what you're doing is running the sound.
Okay.
The technical part of it and making sure nothing blows up. Is
okay,
pretty much
so
what
you're
doing.
Like all of this stuff, and
the techie, yeah.
You know way more than I do, so I'm just impressed by anyone. Now that I've done this, I'm like, I don't know anything. It takes a minute.
It takes a minute to learn, and the stupidest little like setting glitch can throw weird things off. So they want a physical person there babysitting the equipment, so to speak, so that nothing weird happens. And I spent my time doing that, and then by 2013, I had my first offer to actually be on the air.
Okay.
And it wasn't in Pittsburgh, although I tried so hard. They were just like, we love you, but you need more experience.
Okay.
So I was like, okay. And I ended up getting that opportunity in central Illinois, in like the Ottawa, Peru, LaSalle area. Okay. This is like cornfields. This is not Chicago. This is 2.5 hours outside Chicago.
I think we had talked about this in my interview that my family's from the Quad Cities. And
so
we had
far.
Like that part of Illinois, part of the Midwest.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I started to get a taste of what the real Midwest was like. Lots of corn, lots of festivals, lots of community, people up in each other's business because you kind of have to be because you're looking out for each other because there is limited resources. Like, at least that's how I understood it. And it was another world. And I enjoyed it, but I started to see some cracks in the industry. And what I mean is I saw misogyny. I saw chauvinism. I saw egos out the wazoo. I saw limited pay. And just to put this in perspective, one of the things that proved this to me was I found out years later that I started $3,000 a year less than a male coworker that I had who had come from Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, which was an hour and a half from me.
Yeah.
Similar town, similar college experience. He went to college. He was a board op in Punxsutawney, an hour away from where I grew up.
Okay.
And we both happened to end up in this station in Illinois, so it was kind of weird. But we ended up being real good friends, and we still are today. But I found out years later that they started him $3,000 higher than me.
And it's like, for what reason?
We have identical resumes.
Yeah.
We had identical resumes, and I was just, So you start to catch on, and I thought, well, I don't want to give up on radio yet. Maybe if I were doing rock radio, I would be happier. Because at the time, it was country and pop. And that was what was being invested in. And I mean that literally and figuratively. Like, money was going into those two stations. Priority was going into those two stations.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
In more of a rural town, I'd be surprised if it was maybe like classic rock, but like alternative rock and things like that, hard rock, I wouldn't see as much.
Yeah, it just wasn't on the priority list. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to maybe leave this area. And not that I hated it. It actually, Start Rock was a beautiful area. And I enjoyed living there. It was a lot simpler. No traffic. Like, that was nice. But I wasn't finding what I wanted. And my husband came with me throughout all this whole process. And he was struggling, you know, with his job as well at the time. So we both just kind of mutually agreed, let's ditch this and see what else we can find.
Yeah.
That's where Minnesota comes into the picture.
Okay.
That's where Rochester comes into the picture. Rochester offered me a rock radio job and a country radio job. Okay. So I said, let's go. And I loved it, but the same trends were happening.
Okay.
Male dominated. I was one of 2 female hosts in both locations.
Okay.
Because we don't need another female voice.
Well, that's what I was kind of thinking as you're talking about this. I'm thinking about even in Minnesota, we have we had the Dave Ryan show, and then we have like Fallon, and she's the one voice of that show. Or I think 94.5 also has like mostly men, and then they have one woman in the morning. Right. So as you were saying that, I kind of realized, oh yeah, and then we think about big podcasts, big radio shows online too. And it's mostly dominated by men. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine that's not uncommon, unfortunately.
No, it wasn't. And it took going to different stations, which people ask us all the time, why don't radio hosts stay in the same area? Because you can't. Physically, you can't. And the reason is there's a monopoly on these cities. You might have 2 different companies that own a cluster of 6 stations. Okay. Within one town. Okay. So if you don't work for one or the other, then you need to move.
Is it a non-compete situation?
It can be.
Okay.
It can be. When you leave one, you might have a contract that says 6 months you're not working anywhere else. You might. I mean, I didn't sign anything like that, thank God, until I resigned from Minnesota. But I didn't care about signing that because I knew I was done with radio at that point. Okay. Because by that point... Is this 2018? This is 2018, that's right. Okay. This is 5 years ago already. 5 years ago already.
Isn't it crazy? It's like time flies, but it also feels like 2020 lasted about 3 years.
Right. And it's fresh on my mind because I talk about it, but I talk about it because I want other hosts to, one, protect themselves, and I want the public to understand that, yes, it looks fun and it can be fun, but there is stuff going on the inside that needs to be corrected.
And we'll get into that in just a second. I want to reverse a little bit, talk about what it was like growing up in Pittsburgh and then moving to Illinois and Minnesota. I know you and I have talked about this, and I think you also talked about this. I was just listening to one of your podcasts, might have been your newest one with Danielle.
Oh yeah,
I
love Danielle.
About like relocating and how hard it is to make friends in Minnesota. Did you have that in Illinois too?
A little bit, only because my vibe is not their vibe.
Okay.
for lack of better term. And what I mean specifically is I was actually told that like I talk too fast sometimes.
Okay, interesting.
I definitely dress differently. I've just got a completely different persona that isn't seen a whole lot in that part of the country. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just means I'm different. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm different, but it was what it was. In Pittsburgh, I'm not really that different. Okay. For a lot of reasons. Growing up, like, I'm Italian American, like 75% of the city is. Okay. So there's a lot of us little meatballs rolling around there. A lot of us.
Is that really the East Coast?
Oh, yeah.
Like, is a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. A lot of German American, a lot of Irish American, a lot of Italian American, heavy Jewish population. I didn't see my first Hispanic person until I went to LA in 2012.
Oh, wow.
Seriously.
Okay.
Seriously. That was like eye-opening. But that's why we had this conversation about the importance of travel. That's why I think that moving somewhere else is important. So growing up, I wasn't that different ethnically, not one. Number two, economically, I wasn't. I mean, I came from a smaller, like, middle class upbringing. A lot of my friends, their parents were mechanics, nurses, hairdressers. My parents were civil structural engineers.
Okay.
So the steel industry, Pittsburgh, what Pittsburgh is essentially known for. But when that kind of tanked in the 90s and early 2000s, so I actually watched them kind of take turns being laid off.
Okay.
Growing up, and then they did a bunch of things to cover and provide. My mom ran a hot dog cart. My dad did valet parking for, I think, an apartment complex at one point. Like,
you got to do what you have to do
in order
to make it.
So that's, watching that told me that was part of why it was so hard to leave radio, because I thought I was risking stability for my family if I was losing that job security.
Okay.
And mentally, I had to work through treatment to say, no, it's okay to leave this job. It doesn't mean you're never going to find another job again.
That was me in May.
Yeah.
Leaving
Honestly,
my company. Because it's, I don't know, was it your first one? Because it was my first one and I worked there for 5 years. So I was like, I don't know if I'll ever do this again.
Well, yeah, it was the industry. And it was really hard for me to accept that something I grew to love so much was just not, it didn't love me. Very hard to realize that. But Pittsburgh was awesome growing up. And I still go back at least once a year. So, my friends, like, growing up in school, ethnically, I wasn't that different. We had, most of my other friends, though, were black. Like,
okay.
It was a healthy mix. It was probably like 70-30 black, white.
Okay.
From what I remember growing up. And then coming here, I was like, skirt!
Yeah.
Skirt! I was like, okay, this is, like, I remember going to Carrie Underwood in Chicago for the radio station, and it was a white girl convention. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my God, which I kind of expected going into it, but I didn't care. I was there for Carrie. Yeah. I wanted to hear the music. Yeah. And, but even that, I was like, I think I'm the only dark-haired little meatball around.
All blondies.
All blondes. All, like, perfectly straight hair. Like, they're tall, gorgeous, thin. And I'm like, okay.
A different vibe.
Just a different vibe. It's just something you notice. It didn't mean that I felt like I didn't belong. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I only felt that way when people would pick on me for it. Okay. When people would point out differences. Then I kind of was like, all right, well, does that mean we're not cool? Or does that mean, like, yeah, what does that mean?
How are you defining me? Like, what does this mean going forward?
Yeah.
Like, how should I take that? What are you meaning by it?
Does this mean we're not friends? Does this mean you want nothing to do with me? Or does this mean you're just picking on me and being a pain? Yeah. And just, like, try to rile me up because that's just your personality. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Depends on the person.
I find that with, like, older guys here.
Yeah.
Like dads.
Odd.
They really have an interesting sense of humor.
Like, odd. Just odd. But overall, I enjoy it here. I enjoyed it in Pittsburgh too. It's just, there's just differences that I had to understand. Especially in business. I had to understand that, like, I couldn't talk with my hands as much and, like, be as loud.
Oh, that's good literally. To know, 'cause that's all I do.
No, like, literally, sometimes, like, I had someone pull me aside one time because I was a promotions director at a radio station, and I was in conference rooms and meetings. Promotions director means you get to have a hand in, like, the contests that you hear on the air. Okay. Sometimes you even create them. Okay. Which is fun. And you work with, like, other people who are giving away these tickets, and you go, okay, I'll take 5 tickets, and we'll give those away at the Friday afternoon or whatever. Like, you kind of craft those plans and work with those contacts.
Okay, thanks for that insight.
Yeah, I know, because not everybody gets it. I totally understand. It's a little bit inside baseball, but to put it simply, that's what it is. Okay. So I would sometimes sit in those meetings, and I remember one time getting pulled aside, like, girl, you're gonna tone it down. And I'm like, but I'm talking like this. Yes. And they were like, no. Like, that's still a little bit too much. Like, sit on your hands if you have to.
That was one of the first things I noticed when I went to New York to visit was how loud and how fast people talk.
Oh, yeah.
But I felt at home because I'm like, that's how I talk too. And I talk with my hands and I do all of that.
It's
I
the
love
culture.
That.
Yeah, it's the culture. And it does, I think, have to do a little bit with ethnicity because my dad does, my uncles do. The same thing. It's like your house was in New Jersey. It's not that different. Pittsburgh's not that far away. Not that far. It's not that far away. I mean, But just to put it in perspective, I think that was the culture shock, and I had to deal with that regionally. So I'm processing this. I'm processing that this is becoming an industry that might not be conducive to my mental health, and it was a lot all at once.
Kind of going along with that for mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about the history of your mental health and then how you knew that things were getting so bad in work that you needed to step away?
Yeah, well, my first taste of it came with my mom and dad, and I'm going to tell this story because I think a lot of families don't have this opportunity, and I share it so that maybe they can learn. I was fortunate enough to have parents that did discuss their mental health, and I know it's not like that in every family. I know that, and I get it. I understand the reasons for that, but I was lucky enough to see them talk about medications they were taking and the treatment they were taking. They had their own therapists. They had their own medication regimens to help both of them, respectively, with anxiety and depression.
Okay.
It was a lot of what both my mom and dad were dealing with, and they didn't hide it. So that made me more comfortable, I think, talking about it to begin with. And then their divorce was really hard.
Okay.
When I was like 17, 18. So I was dealing with that. And then I don't think I fully processed that by the time I became a working adult on my own. At like 23, I left Pittsburgh. So I don't think I had processed that. Plus I was becoming an adult. I was responsible for myself, learning how to be independent, learning the ins and outs of this industry, petrified that if I lost this job, that meant my stability was gone for me and my husband, which wasn't true, but that was the lie that I told myself.
That's anxiety speaking, yeah.
Yeah. I went through that, and then I think I had so much pent up stuff that I did not handle and did not process that I did not recognize what it was until I started putting my shoes on while knowing I was going to work and crying. And then I was like, that's weird. Okay. And I let it happen, but I didn't think about it. And then
when you start getting the Sunday scaries every single day.
Yeah, it was just odd. And then I remember I got what was called a performance improvement plan, where it was literally this list on a sheet of paper of things they wanted me to think about, correct, blah, 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 blah. And none of it was constructive. It was subjective.
I'm only laughing not at you, but before I quit in May, that's what I was given as well.
They're the worst!
And that's how I knew. I was like, I feel like I need to leave this place. And I knew I had to leave it then, because I was like, none of this is realistically what's happening. Like, I'm asking other coworkers and they're not agreeing that this is what is going on. I feel like it is subjective.
It was so subjective. And the reason I say subjective is because there was no explanation behind the critique. Mm-hmm. It was just, I think I like this better than this. Or like it was the equivalent of like going through a museum and looking at a painting. Like, I think I like this better than this. Don't do that anymore. Why? I don't know. I just do.
Yeah. Like it's subjective because we don't know what went into that art, and because maybe we don't even know the artist. We're just like, I like this, I don't. Mm-hmm. And when somebody comes to you and treats you that way, I mean, you're basically being treated like a product. The
entire time.
Do this or don't.
Yeah.
And that's it.
The entire time. And that's how they look at you. They look at a host as a tool to be the mouthpiece of their message. They say they want personality. They say they want someone involved in the community. They want someone to parrot whatever their wish is. Okay. That's it.
So that even comes with music-related radio. Because I could see that more with like political radio or talk radio, but I'm surprised to hear that music-related.
It does. And, I wasn't involved in upper management at all, thank God. I don't think I ever will, because I have too much of an opinion. And but I started to see that, like, okay, we have a deal with this company or this whatever, this person is my friend, so that means we're going to play this artist 10 times an hour, or blah, 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 blah. Or not just that, but, this station in New York is doing this, so we're going to follow what they're doing. Okay. Because they're successful. And they crafted their playlist based on this. And it was just odd. There was very little logic behind a lot of the reasoning. And I remember sitting in meetings being really confused, already anxious about keeping the job. And then when you're such a people pleaser that you want to know you've done something right, and once in a while you need those words of affirmation saying, no, this is correct, you're good, and you're not getting that.
I can imagine.
Tough.
So is a lot of it not, I always assumed Top 40 radio is based on data.
Yeah.
But is it not? Okay.
It is, but the data that they're using doesn't have logic behind it. It's just, let's follow what this station is doing. And the trend, the cycle, whatever word you want to use, to me they're interchangeable because that's how I saw them use those terms. That was what they did. They followed each other.
Okay.
So
and
like
it is getting kind of bribed in order to have
maybe
outcomes.
Not. They won't tell you legally. There are legal.
Please don't sue me.
They won't tell you, but there are laws. They're called payola laws, where you cannot promote something or play an artist a lot just because you were bribed. And if they can prove that there was a bribe, then that's illegal. They're called payola laws.
Okay.
So yeah, you're supposed to follow those, but I never quite understood how they worked, and it never made sense to me that one station in LA or one station in New York controlled what the rest of the country did.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
It was just odd, very, very odd. Like they kept out of their mouth was, we want to be part of the community and we want to honor the community and talk about things the community is excited about. But there wasn't a lot of local interaction.
Okay.
There was just follow the leader.
From radio stations you listen to, obviously you're not on the back end anymore, but do you feel like some stations are doing a better job? And do you have stations locally that you like, who you feel like help with that? Okay.
Unfortunately, I think it's become even more sanitized, more filtered, more stations are doing what's called syndicated radio.
Okay.
Where one host will be somewhere like New York or LA, and that show gets funneled to 50 other stations across the country. Okay. And that's what takes up that afternoon time slot or morning time slot or whatever it is.
Okay, so is that like iHeartRadio has ones like in LA and then they play it in a Minnesota station?
Seacrest in the morning or whatever.
That's exactly what I was just thinking of. Okay.
That's exactly what it is, and they do that on purpose because it's cheaper.
Okay.
They don't have to pay as many hosts. They don't have to pay as much when it comes to production. There's half of a team. You only have to worry about that team creating that one show, but you're still putting the content out there for 50 to 70 other stations across the country.
Okay.
So we're seeing more syndicated radio, which I don't think is a good thing.
Because it's taking it out of the local, not only economy, but workers and the local music scene.
It ignores, you don't, there's less focus on discussion involving what the community really cares about. So that's the behind the scenes. Yes, it looks fun. Yes, it's a lot of glamour. The actual act of broadcast is still fun, but not on a corporate terrestrial level. That's why I think podcasts are blowing up right now.
Okay, it's 2018. You know you want to leave radio. And is this when you started podcasting, or did you just go do a different job and do social media for a while?
No, yeah, so I needed a break. Mama needed a break after after group therapy and outpatient programs and going to the ER because I had suicidal ideation.
Okay.
And there is a difference between ideation and like a full-blown attempt. Obviously, I think that kind of goes without saying what the difference is. I did not attempt, but I had a plan. I thought about it, and that's what suicidal ideation is. Okay. That's how it's defined. And once, I didn't know this, but when you are in a crisis like that, the ER does define that as a crisis. Ideation is enough for them to take you in and check with you.
Which is kind of good. Yeah. Because it kind of should be.
It's good to know. I didn't know. I had to, when I had a full-blown anxiety attack at work 10 minutes before I was on the air, about a week after I got that performance improvement plan, that's when I've had a friend come who was also a coworker who found me upset and said, let's go to the ER. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm not hurt. And they were like, what do you mean?
Yeah, you're mentally not well, girl.
Yeah, they were like, no. But what I meant, without saying these words, what I meant was, physically, I'm not harmed. How does that justify me going to the ER? And they were like, no, that's not the only reason you can go to an ER. So if you're struggling, remember that.
Yes.
But you can, if you're really, really stuck, you can go to your local ER. But anyway, so we go through that, and then I resigned October of that year, and I remember looking at my boss in the face and saying, you know what, we've tried, me and him specifically, we tried for 2.5 years and this just isn't working. And I said that to his face.
Yeah.
And because I was like, listen, we're not going to pretend anymore. Your personality, my personality, they never clicked. We never figured it out. I think I'm done. And he just sort of accepted that and said, okay, have your resignation letter on my desk in the morning.
Sometimes, that is almost more frustrating because you kind of want them to fight for you a little bit. And then when they don't, at least in my case, I was like, that was like a second slap to the face.
Kind of, but it was also the confirmation I needed.
True.
It was also that I was like, okay, if this is his attitude, then I was right the entire time. If he's not going to try and say, whoa, what do we need to work on personally between him and I?
Yeah.
We never had a conversation, just him and I, about our dynamic between the two of us. I don't know why that was. I begged for it. I did ask for it, and I didn't get it. But so I quit. And then Mama needed a break. So she took a break for like about 1.5 years doing anything but radio. I had a blog called Val in Vogue. And this is when blogging was the thing, and that was connected with the Instagram, so I was having fun with outfit photos and writing blog posts.
Yeah, because you have fun style.
Yeah.
Have you always had this kind of style, or is this something that's adapted over time?
I think it kind of adapted over time as my interest in music sort of took off too, because fashion and music have always gone hand in hand. Mm-hmm. Always. So I think when I dived more into one, the other kind of, the fashion part of it sort of came after. Okay. Especially after I saw how other girls on Instagram were styling what they were doing, and I was like, ooh, that. I didn't know I could do that, but I do want to do that. So I was watching that, and I was running the front desk at a music school for kids, because I still love the music thing.
Yeah.
And there was a little school in Rochester called the Rochester Academy of Music, where I think it's kids and adults as well, but it was mostly kids taking music lessons. Very simple, like guitar, piano, anything. And I ran that front desk for 1 year, and the job was great, but it was second shift. It was weird hours. It was like noon to 8. So I was like, okay, I think I need to change. You know, this was good for me to get out and do something different and obtain some transferable skills. I did that, and I was able to kind of calm down and process what I had just been through. And by the time I was ready to leave the music school job, I was like, okay, I think I figured it out. I want to do the content and the social media in my off time because it's fun, but I want a job that mentally I can leave at 5 p.m.
Yeah. Because
I hadn't had that yet. So that's what I found in Mayo Clinic. I do what every other Minnesotan does, and I work at Mayo Clinic.
That's so true.
Honestly, which is great. But the nice part about that is, you know, yes, sometimes it can be stressful at that job too, but ultimately, because I'm not a medical professional, for lack of a better term, I can leave that job at 5 p.m. Mentally.
Yeah.
And then and do this, fun things like this, or go anywhere else and do what I want to do with that. The podcasting came in the middle of COVID boredom. I started to recognize the popularity of podcasting in 2020. I started to see more about Joe Rogan. I started to see Alex Cooper and Call Her Daddy and and them doing their thing. And I was like, wait a second. I've been doing this before all y'all.
I've been doing this for decades.
I've been doing this before, maybe not Joe Rogan, but definitely before Alex Cooper. I was like, I've been doing this before all y'all. If anybody needs to be doing this, it is me.
And you had the skills, the transferable skills.
And the literal programs to edit the thing myself.
You already had those on your computer from your work before.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I paid for it. Yes.
What editing programs do you have?
I have what's called Adobe Audition. It is superior to Audacity, but if you want something free and you're just getting started and you just want like a nice clean edit, Audacity is a great way to start. It's a totally free program, so take that note if you want to get into it. But Adobe Audition is $20 a month. It is a production program where you can take audio files and do with them what you will.
I'm using GarageBand. So
but it works.
I'm like the free version.
But it works. I mean, there's more options, I think, now than there were when I was in college and still learning these programs. So that's kind of how it started. And then I was like, all I have to do is find a podcast hosting site. It pushes things out to Spotify and Apple Podcasts for me. Ta-da! All I have to do is edit the audio. I was like, are you kidding? It's this easy? So I bought a mic, and said, let's go. And I started it in like the summer of 2020 and just kind of played with it. It didn't become a serious thing. Very Vogue was the first one.
Okay.
And I called it that because I wanted it to play on the former blog.
Okay, yeah.
And I was like, let's do Very Vogue. And I knew what it was going to be about. And I kind of structured it that way. And it really took off, I think, January 2021 was when I started to actually have guests and really like put out stuff consistently.
Okay.
And it's been fun ever since. And once I did that, I was like, a year later, oh, let's add this podcast. Let's add that podcast. And now that we just hit spooky season, I just did Chilling Chatter because I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to do a paranormal and horror one too. Let's go. Let's bring
Okay,
that
I
one.
wondered because I looked at your list of podcasts and I was like, I don't remember ever seeing this one before. So
It's brand new.
Okay.
It's very new. It's very new. We just launched this past October, and it's been a lot of fun. I was in the mood for it because it is spooky season.
Yes.
And I've been wanting to do it for some time because I have always been interested in the subject. If you're a fan of metal music, you are also a horror fan. They've always gone horror, like
That's so true. I have a cousin who loves metal, and he also loves horror movies.
Yeah, they go hand in hand because the artistry, whether it's the imagery in movies, kind of goes hand in hand with the album covers.
Okay.
And then, so you have that along with the same subjects that are sung about.
Let's go into your podcasts. What's something about podcasting that most people would not know?
How easy it is to put it together.
Well, that was going to be my next question is how do you balance all the podcasts? And what's your schedule for
the secret to balancing 4 of them is recording ahead and actually uploading them ahead of time.
Oh, okay.
I batch them. I will take 1 weekend a month where I do all of the coming episodes for the following month.
Oh, that's so smart.
And then ta-da. I don't have to worry about it during the week. I don't have to worry about it so much if something changes or in my schedule or whatever. Batching content ahead of time has been really key for me to stay consistent with them and to actually have an episode coming out every week. Slightly changing that because I want more of a topical aspect when it comes to All Octaves and Very Vogue.
Okay.
Very Vogue now has Hot Goss where I talk about the recent hot gossip.
I love that. I definitely binged some episodes before you came here because I was like, oh, I don't remember her having these
it's new,
little tidbits at the beginning. So I really like that.
Yeah, because I was like, well, we're already talking about this. Let's go. Yeah. So I kind of hold off on producing those ones at the same. And for what's happening in music, I have my own. I call it Music Scoop for All Octaves too. Same concept though.
Okay.
Let's talk about what's happening this week.
And you just find people that you're interested in. You kind of
that makes sense.
Where they fit.
Yeah, people that make sense for whatever the overarching topic of the podcast is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Here is the final bit that we're going to do. We're going to do a speed round of questions.
Let's go.
Based on your 4 podcasts. Mm-hmm. Some might say that I'm not a horror film fanatic. I really don't like them. I do good with thrillers, but not horror. Yeah. But I'm curious, what thrillers would you recommend or horror films you'd recommend for those of us who can't take all of the demonic kind of paranormal movies?
Oh, okay. So
maybe a starter.
Got it. Well, for me, it depends because it depends on the reason why that person doesn't like a horror movie. If somebody is just not into the gore, then I say the original Blair Witch.
Okay.
Because there's not a lot of gore in that, but there's definitely enough to keep you interested, and it's a little bit more thriller, slightly paranormal.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, if gore is what you have a problem with, then start with Blair Witch.
For me personally, I can take a true crime.
Yeah.
But I can't take not even a ghost, but a spirit. That type of stuff scares me so badly. I'll sit in bed and think about it for days.
Don't ever watch Kate Hudson's Skeleton Key then.
Okay. I watched, what's it called? Oculus, the one about the mirror, and that one stayed with me for literal weeks.
Yep.
I couldn't do it.
Yep, there's voodoo and people in mirrors in the Skeleton Key, so okay, that's off the list. That's off the list for Kaylee, but that's okay.
Maybe just give me a couple starter ones. So the Blair Witch Project, you said?
Yeah, because that one's not so...
Because I'm going to participate in spooky season. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, and that one's not so aggressive.
Okay.
For lack of a better term, like there's enough to keep you interested, but it's not so gory. It's not as paranormal as something like the Skeleton Key, where there's like people in mirrors and stuff, and it screws with your head. Like no, so it's not as bad. So I would say start with the original Blair Witch.
Okay.
Probably. Other ones. Oh, I'm trying to think of some other ones. Again, it all depends. I mean, even the original Halloween, like, it can be a little bit gory, but I don't know. For me, I sit back and I'm like, meep, dude in a boiler suit just kind of walking around town. That's kind of odd.
Like a cheesiness to the old ones that I like.
There's a little bit of it. Well, there's a little bit of cheese. There's a right amount of cheese.
The right amount of Gouda.
The right amount for like certain ones. Like the original ones, and the older that you go, the cheesier they are.
See, that's what I like.
Yeah.
There's one, it's super old from like the 60s, and it's like the glob people and zombies and like those ones. Mm-hmm. I like those because those are so cheesy to me.
Yeah, they're cheesy.
They don't scare me.
Yeah, they're cheesy, but yeah, they're not overwhelming. But the more recent, I think, it's become sort of overwhelming. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting. I think the Blair Witch is one of my favorites just because you would not have like Paranormal Activity without Blair Witch.
Okay. Was that like the original?
The style of film, I think, the Blair Witch set the precedent for that style of film.
Okay.
Making it like somewhat self-documentary, but you're not catching all of the creepy things going on and camera cuts here, camera cuts there. More, it's self-documentation, that whole aspect of it. Blair Witch did it first.
Okay.
So that's
it's the OG.
Yeah, in my opinion, it started then.
Okay. What podcasts are you loving right now?
Right now, because it's spooky season, 2 Girls, 1 Ghost.
Okay.
That's been a joy to listen to. And I do like Nick Thompson from Love is Blind, his Eyes Wide Open.
Okay.
That's been really interesting. If you love reality TV and you want to know anything behind the scenes or mixed in with mental health talk, that's a great podcast for you.
Okay, I really gotta open my horizons on podcasts because these sound fun, but I have not heard of either of them. So.
Yeah, and there's millions. That's what makes, like, podcasting is fun, but there's millions.
Yes.
So there's so much to choose from, and it makes it kind of tough. But
that is so true. What's your favorite current trend in fashion?
The fact that everything is a 90s revival.
Mm-hmm.
Like, honestly.
90s in what way? Which part of 90s do you like?
Grunge era 90s.
Okay.
Definitely. You're like, I'm not shocked.
No, I didn't know. I was like, maybe I'll be surprised.
Yeah, but the 90s revival is my favorite part of it. And now we're going to start to see, like, I think, the Y2K era, early 2000s. So I'm like, yes.
I'm ready for, like, 2010s, like, Jersey Shore.
Oh,
I hated it when I lived through it the first time, but I kind of want to redo it again, but like be an adult this time. Because I was 14 and I couldn't do like stripper heels and like bodycon dresses and bump its. It just wasn't allowed. I went to private school. Like it just wasn't it, you know?
It's probably coming back. See, for me, that was everyday. Like I look around in Pittsburgh and there are a dime and a dozen. There's so many.
Well, you're close to Jersey too.
Yeah, there's so many. For me, I was like that. I wasn't really that into it because I guess because it was so common and I saw it every day.
Oh, in the Midwest, it was so risque. Yeah, like we were so into it.
What? You're like, for you, it was fun to play with, but for me, I'm like, I see that every day.
That's so true. I never thought about that.
It's funny.
Who's your favorite musical artist at the moment?
At the moment,
maybe some local and some national, international.
Yeah, I mean, that list is always ever changing, but right now I've been listening to a lot of like Opeth, Typo Negative, Mastodon. They're all like hard rock and metal acts. I do like the Rumors, who are out of Iowa. Okay. They're really cool. So they're more of a hard rock sound as well. And we're blessed with a pretty good scene in Minnesota too. Mm-hmm. Like we really are. I love 13 Arrows. They're out of Minneapolis. Oh, who else? There's just so many. Ninth Planet out of Rochester, where I am. They're another more rock oriented act. Okay. Like
I'll try and look these up and get some links down below for the video version.
There's something for everything. I think that's the nicest part about the Minnesota scene is there is an act for whatever genre of music you're into. Nerdy.
We'll let it be.
Nerdy. I love it. Nerdy is like for hip hop, love him. Love Jay Havoc out of Rochester. He's another good one if you're more so into the hip hop stuff. And there are pop artists too. Like there's something for everyone.
Well, Val, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your insight into the radio industry and that background, and also podcasting. I think you've educated all of us so much on just things that like I personally definitely didn't know about the background of radio.
Yeah.
Some things I don't know if I want to know, but I really appreciate you for coming down and for driving from Rochester especially. I'm like floored that you came all the way from there.
Why not?
Do you drive a lot usually? Is that like normal for you?
Not every day,
Okay.
but that's probably why I enjoy doing it, because I'm like, oh, this is something new today. Something different that I don't get to do every day. Why not?
Wow.
I already have
We're
plans here
different.
anyway.
You're a dedicated person. I'll tell you that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.